Hey, welcome everyone to Sippin' Ground Coffee, our summer series of live streams. A couple of things here just before we get started. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, click that little bell somewhere on your screen there. That'll give you notifications every time we are going to do one of these live streams. Also, there's going to be a secret code word given out today. The whole idea behind this is that over the course of the next couple of months, I suppose through the end of August, we're going to be doing at least a half a dozen different topics. Today, for example, is how to rebuild and repair a centrifugal pump. But there's going to be a half a dozen topics, and each of those are going to be presented several times. And what we'd like is that you attend at least 3 of them and email us that code word that I'm going to give you a little later in this presentation, and email that back to marketing@flintandwalling.com. And then also subscribe to our newsletter for updates. Make sure you do that. So that all said, we're going to get started today with a kind of a virtual walkthrough on how to repair or rebuild a centrifugal pump. When we're talking about this, I want to mention to everyone that what we're going to do today in the process of virtually taking this pump apart, this could apply to a jet pump, this could apply to a self-priming lawn sprinkling pump, in addition to these centrifugal pumps. These pumps really, when it comes to taking them apart and inspecting them, rebuilding them, there's a lot of commonality between all these. The thing that I would also point out is that, as you can see on the screen, when this pump is installed, I would tell the customer, I'm going to install this pump in a manner that it can be serviced down the road, and it can be serviced rather efficiently. And so what we're talking about here is, let's see if this clicker works, and try to advance this slide. Okay, so if you see on the screen, there's your suction's in the very front, your discharge is out the top, as you can see. There's a drain plug at the bottom, and keep that in mind, because that pump housing, that front casting, as we take that off, it doesn't matter whether it's this centrifugal or a jet or a self-primer, it doesn't matter. Note the orientation of that drain plug being at the bottom, and particularly on these centrifugal pumps, because you've got 4 options of putting that thing on, and only one of them is going to be right as you put that pump housing back on. It's got to have the drain plug at the bottom and that priming plug up at the top. All right, that priming plug is to be taken out while priming the pump. It makes it more easy and efficient to prime that pump. So what do we talk about make the pump more serviceable? Well, you would be wise to incorporate a T on the discharge side of this pump, because that will provide a priming port. And you can put a plug in the top of that T. This way, if that pump needs to be primed down the road for whatever reason, you have a way of getting water into that pump body and into that suction line without having to cut any pipe or piping. So whoops, there we go. There we go. That makes for a good priming port there. You can add water. Some contractors, I know, they've mounted a bushing up there at the top, and they'll thread a pressure gauge in. Either way, it does just provide a way of being able to prime that pump. The other thing that would make this pump a lot easier to service would be the incorporation of unions, both on the suction and discharge side of the pump, because with unions, as you know, it makes it very simple to take that pump out of the plumbing and have it serviced, and then be able to reinstall it with the unions. Short of that, if it's plastic pipe, you're probably going to have to cut it, and then once you've cut it, you're going to have to couple it back together. And I don't know how many times we can get away doing that, but with the unions, that pump can be installed and removed several times. So those are a couple things that'll help make this pump serviceable down the road. So as we get started in tearing this pump apart, step 1, obviously, is make sure we have no power running to that motor, right? So we want to disconnect any power that's running to the pump motor as we begin to tear this thing apart. And once we've taken the power away, If there's any pressure on that pump, you want to release that pressure before before you start taking the bolts out of the front of it. If you have a priming port up there, you can just loosen that plug and that'll take any pressure off of it, or open a valve somewhere. But make sure you get the pressure down to 0, no power, and now we're ready to take this pump apart. So, in so doing, what we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove what they call pump through bolts. These are going to be bolts that hold the pump body onto the mounting bracket that mounts to the motor. And again, whether it's jets or centrifugals, it doesn't matter. There's going to be 4 bolts, and we're going to take those out. In this case, it's a 9/16 inch. You can use a box end wrench, a socket wrench, what have you. Those are 9/16 inch through bolts. They're rather long because they go all the way back into the motor mount. And with these centrifugal pumps, also keep this in mind. Centrifugal pumps can come as a single stage or multi-stage, 2 or 3 stages, meaning 1, 2, or 3 impellers. This particular teardown is only going to be the single stage pump, but it's very simple. If we have a 2-stage or 3-stage pump, all we need to do is repeat what we just did, and I'll kind of walk through that with you as we get to that point. But when we take those 4 bolts off, that's going to allow what we call a suction flange to be removed, all right? In reality, in classroom, that's going to come off real easy because we take these pumps apart and put them together all the time. In reality, in the field, you're probably going to need to have some kind of like a rubber mallet to bang on that front casting, because just behind that is a gasket material. And if you're familiar with gasket material, this stuff can have what of an adhesive to it, and so makes it a little challenging to break that apart, short of having a mallet. But with that mallet, you're going to be able to take that front flange or that front pump body right off the front of that pump. And when you do, if this were a jet pump, the next thing that you would see is what's called a diffuser. Let me give you an explanation here on what this diffuser is, because there's also one on this centrifugal pump as well. Excuse me. In these surface or above ground pumps, the impeller is going to create a lot of velocity as that water comes through the eye and it gets thrown out those veins. That's going to create a lot of velocity. What diffusers do is they essentially take that velocity created by that impeller and they convert that to pressure. All right, that's what a diffuser does. So in the case of a jet pump, there's a plastic diffuser that would now sit over that impeller just below that pump body. But in the case of a centrifugal pump or a self-priming pump, as soon as you take that front flange off, you're going to get right to that impeller. Now, to take this impeller off, all right, that same 9/16 inch wrench can be used. There's a flat spot on the shaft between the pump and the motor, right? It's located about right there, right? There's a flat spot on that shaft that you can put that wrench on, and what that's going to do is that's going to hold that shaft stationary as you unthread the impeller off of it. Pumps that may not have that flat spot, in other words, the mounting bracket and the motor are right smack together, then what you'll find is on the very front end of that pump shaft, there'll be a slot for a flat-bladed screwdriver to be used for the same reason, to hold that shaft stationary as you thread that impeller off. When we talk about, there we go. So when we talk about threading this impeller off, I've got to tell you, this is something that I think most pump companies would recommend, but not very often is this followed, and that is the use of a strap wrench to remove the impellers, all right? These strap wrenches, we used these and demonstrated them in the classroom. They're kind of like that old wrench back in the day that we used to use to remove oil filters off of car engines. Excuse me. So what that strap wrench will do is it'll actually grab the entire outside portion of that impeller. The whole idea here is these impellers, if they're not damaged and they're not worn, they can be cleaned and reused. So we don't want to damage them in the process of taking them off, all right? So that's the way we can unthread an impeller right off the shaft. However, here's probably the way most people are going to do it, right? I mean, that's just the reality. Most people are going to put some kind of an adjustable wrench on the eye of that impeller, and they're going to try to unthread it that way, and they'll be successful. But there's a high risk, all right? There's a high risk that you can damage that impeller in that process. So if it's something that you want to be reusing, make sure you don't damage that eye where that wrench is on there, because if you do, you will have just changed the entire dynamics of that pump, and you won't be satisfied with the performance. So again, if you use an adjustable wrench, take a lot of caution. When we talk about impellers, all right, especially on these centrifugal pumps, when you take these apart, there's actually, with Flint & Walling, there's a choice of impellers. One is a no-lead bronze impeller, and that impeller is going to be balanced in our factory 100%. Every single impeller, whether it's on a pump or whether you ordered it as a replacement part, it's going to be balanced. Hey, yeah, that sounds good. Thank you there, Derek. Ice cold groundwater. Yeah. No lead bronze impellers, all right? That's one option. The other option is a thermal plastic injection molded impeller. There's a very precise method of molding. Those impellers are balanced when we get those in. Our plastic injection molder, are part of our own family of companies, manufacture that for us, that plastic impeller. Irrespective of either impeller, all right, either impeller. Well, I'm sorry, before I get ahead of myself, I guess I got another slide in here. This would be an example of a three-stage centrifugal pump, all right? Three impellers in there. And I'm trying to think, maybe the reason I pulled this slide in is because sometimes I get asked, the difference between the bronze and the plastic. Hey, is one better than the other? And my response historically has always been, I wouldn't turn my hand, at least for the difference in performance. They both perform comparably. They both seem to last a long, long time. Our warranty return rates are ridiculous, less than 0.5% on these things. But at any rate, I'm going to hold off on that story. I'm going to hold off on that story till a little later. Again, either impeller. When you get these off of the centrifugal pump, the next thing we want to do is we want to inspect them, and we want to make sure there's nothing lodged in the eye of those impellers. That's where the water's going to enter from the water source into that pump. It's going to go right into the eye of that impeller. And then we also want to make sure those vanes are clean. And so a stiff wire or a stiff piece of wire can be used to just run up and inside those vanes to, again, make sure that there's no corrosion buildup or anything particulate that's lodged in there. We want to make sure those are clean. And once we've got those vanes cleaned and that eye is clean, and that's a pretty easy thing to take a visual on, then we can flush it out with water and reuse them if we want to. But anyway, that's the impellers, okay? So you're going to look for any damage or any wear. If there is, then we'll replace them. If not, they can be reused. The next thing we want to make sure that we do is get rid of all that old gasket material. That's very important because when we put this back together, we've got to have a clean surface for the new gasket material to seal against. And I think most of us know that. That's pretty much common sense. But again, just make sure that you get all that old gasket material off of there. And probably going to need a wire brush of some type to just, clean that casting up, again, where that new gasket is going to need to seal. It's at this point now that we reach what's called a rotary seal. And your code word today is cartridge. There you go. Write that down, put that on an email, send that to marketing@Flint & Walling, and you'll get credit for today's session. Because rotary seals, all right, that's probably the most critical, most commonly replaced part on a above ground pump. This is what seals the shaft coming out of the motor into the pump body. That's what it does. And just a few notes on this, all right? There's a lot of different names for this rotary seal. Some people call it a mechanical seal. Some people call it a code word cartridge seal, and yet others may call it a shaft seal. But a rose by any other name, still going to be a rose, right? But just a few things here on this rotary seal that I think would be important to know. You know, number one, when would this need to be replaced? Well, that's an easy answer. They need to be replaced when they start leaking. And when you start to get water dripping out of the backside of that pump body and dripping right down onto the ground or the floor, then that's an indication that we've lost the seal, that cartridge seal. And again, looking at the industry across all brands, okay, that's probably the most commonly replaced part on a centrifugal type pump. So, what are the likely causes of that thing to leak? All right, well, there's several things that can cause that to leak. Number one is if you get a heat rise. All right, cartridge seals that's used by most don't like this. So when do you get a heat rise? If a pump is deadheading, all right, that's probably one of the most destructive things you could ever have a pump go through. And that means that this pump is pumping against a closed valve. So there's no place for the water to go. And so that pump's going to sit there and churn that same water over and over and over again. And it's literally going to heat that water up, and it can't even get it to the boiling point. That's a lot of heat. And so that can damage a cartridge seal. Another thing that can damage a cartridge seal is sand and abrasives. A lot of times these particular type of pumps, centrifugal pumps, they're pulling water out of lakes or ponds. And so, you know, sometimes if you have a sand-laden water supply, it's going to be very abrasive inside of that pump. And then the other thing is they will not last forever, right? Eventually these are going to wear out and they're going to need to be replaced. And so those are basically the things that will cause that rotary seal to leak over time. If I were selling Flint and Walling pumps, this is one thing I would not keep a secret when it comes to these surface pumps or these above ground pumps, and that's this. Flint and Walling, all of our pumps are going to have what we call a silicon carbide seal, all right? That's a standard seal that cartridge is going to be made out of. That cartridge seal is silicon carbide. And I want to point out the differences because most every other pump that I'm aware of, they don't use silicon carbide, they use ceramic carbon, all right? It's a little less costly. In fact, it's a lot less costly. But there's a big difference between the silicon carbide and the ceramic carbon, and I want to point out what those differences are, which are the reasons why F&W uses this as a standard part of their manufacturing. First of all, when it comes to heat rise, all right? When it comes to heat rise, silicon carbide is going to be far greater tolerant of heat rise than ceramic carbon. What happens with ceramic carbon is that it's a great sealing surface. Don't get me wrong. It's a smooth sealing surface. It's hard. Again, it's a great sealing surface. But one thing that ceramic does not like, and that is a heat or temperature change. Because when that happens, it'll fracture. You'll get a crack in that, and when you get a crack in there, guess what? You're leaking, all right? So we're going to use silicon carbide. We've run this pump dry 4 hours, folks. I mean, no leaks, no problems there at all. So again, this will withstand heat rise. You can also get heat rise if the pump's running dry, right? If it's running dry, you're gonna heat up pretty quick. When it comes to sand and abrasives, again, silicon carbide is a lot more resistant to sand and abrasives than the counterpart ceramic carbon. And then the other thing, yes, this is a more costly seal to put in these pumps, but it will outlast ceramic carbon 5 to 1. So those are all good reasons to use silicon carbide seals. If you look at that photo on the screen, that top right there, on the two images up there, the one on the right, that inner portion, the dark, you got a dark rubber portion on the outside, but the inner portion is also dark. If that were a ceramic cartridge, that would be pure white. So it's very, very easy to tell the difference also between a silicon carbide and a ceramic carbon. The rotary seal is going to consist of three components. What these three components are going to be is a spring, which is going to put tension on what we call face seals. And there's two of those, right? There's two of those face seals. So now what we're going to do is talk about, replacing this. Again, this is probably the most commonly replaced component on a centrifugal pump. But we're doing it in a virtual world, so let's do the best we can here with what we've got to work with. We've already got that impeller off. If you recall, we used that strap wrench in the earlier slide to get that impeller off of there. So let's get that out of the picture. Now, once that impeller's been removed, then the next thing we're going to take off is that spring, all right? And sometimes that spring comes off with the impeller. Either way, we just need to get the spring off that shaft because it goes over the hub of the impeller. It goes over that hub there on the right side of that impeller. It also goes over that hub on that one section of the face seal. And again, either way, it'll come off, all right? Once you got that off of there, all right, we're going to get that all out of the way. It's fairly easy to get the first section of that face seal out of there, and it sits back in a cavity. I'm going to show you another image here in a minute or two, but this cartridge seal sits back in a cavity, and that first section's fairly easy to get off. You can use an adjustable wrench and just yank that thing off there. There it comes. All right, there it goes. And so that's easy to get that one off. The next one is a little bit challenging. If you've ever replaced a cartridge seal on a above ground pump, you would concur that this can be a little bit challenging because that second seal that's still back there in that pump casting, all right? The seal is actually sitting in what looks like a rubber model tire, all right? And that's what seals back there in that cavity is that rubber tire around that ceramic seal. And to get that thing out of there's where the challenge is at. Every single instruction manual I've ever looked in, and I've looked at them all, will suggest that to get that out of there, you use a couple of thin-bladed screwdrivers and go in to the sides and kind of pop that out of there or pry that out of there. And that's fine and dandy. I've not had a lot of success doing that myself. But then again, my thin-bladed screwdrivers weren't just quite long enough to get any kind of leverage. So if you're going to use thin-bladed screwdrivers, you better have something better than a pocket screwdriver, or you'll never get the leverage on it. One way that I've also taken these out, and I don't know that these are going to be in the instruction manual or not, but one way I've taken them out of there is I use a pair of needle nose pliers, and I go in and I grab that rubber. I just go in and I pinch that rubber and I just yank that out of there. And you know what? I don't care if this comes off in one or two pieces. I'm replacing it anyway. I just want to get it out of there. But either way, we need to get that out of that cavity that sits back into the middle of that pump body. And I think here comes that photo of what that could look like, all right? So you can see the inside of this pump, it can get a little corroded in there. And so you're going to want to clean that casting up. You can see where the 4 bolts go through. You can also see the cavity back there where that cartridge seal is going to need to seat. And so again, when replacing and rebuilding these, you want to make sure you get the castings clean. You want to make sure you get that cavity clean, all right? Now, when we get ready to put this back in, we've got the castings all cleaned up. We've got that cavity cleaned up, and we're ready to put this thing back in. On that little canister that this seal ships in, it's a little plastic. It looks like a pill canister. There's a warning label on there. All right, there's a warning label on there, and that warning label, I want to point out what the warning label says because I don't know that it's followed very often. But for a lubricant, all we want to use is water. Period. Water. Dip that seal in water. Don't use any kind of spray, silicone grease on it. None of that stuff. None of that stuff. The only thing you need to lubricate that seal is water. It's the way we do it when we build these things in the factory. We squirt that all up with water. Those two face seals right there, where they come together, those we need to keep pristine, all right? So there's going to be a second warning on this little tube that this cartridge seal, replacement cartridge seal ships in. And that second warning is going to say, do not touch those face seals with your fingers. Because, if you're taking this pump apart, you more than likely got grit and grime on your fingers, oils on your fingers. And if you get any of that on that seal surface, look at what that says on the warning. It says, dust particles or dirt on the faces of this seal injure it permanently. Not maybe. It says it injures it permanently, and it will cause it to leak after reassembly. And then we get to do it all over again. So just be cautious of those two surfaces there. Not to touch them with your finger. In fact, when we put these back on, all right, it's not that important that you get that first segment pushed all the way back into that cavity. It doesn't. You want to get it started, but it doesn't need to be pushed all the way back into that cavity. And then when you put that second face seal on, all right, it doesn't need to be right up against the first one, all right? A lot of people feel like, I got to get this thing to all seal and get seated in there at this moment in time. Well, you're going to put that spring on next, right? Let's do that. All right, now, when we're at this point, we've got the shaft seal replaced, and we've got the spring on. Now you're going to bring that impeller back. You're going to compress that spring down far enough that you can start threading that impeller on the end of that shaft, okay? And watch what happens to those two face seals as you thread that impeller down. So as that impeller gets threaded down, it will automatically seat those where they need to be. That's why that spring's there, to provide that tension. And once you screw that impeller down hand tight, you're pretty much good to go. And that spring will provide enough tension on there to seal that, make that a nice seal. All right? Let me see where we're at on time. We're almost going to be about a half hour, I guess. All right, so now we're going to replace the gaskets. Yeah, we're going to replace the gaskets. And by the way, if this were a two-stage pump, well, then you would take this next segment off, would come off. There'd be another gasket behind it and another impeller. And you take that off, and if it were a three-stage, it'd be just a repeat of what we've just done. If it were a two-stage or a three-stage pump, it's simply a repeat of what we have just done. And so in that case, depending on that stages, you would have one or two or more gaskets to replace. Once you've got those gaskets all replaced, now we're going to position those, what they call those pump through bolts, all right? And we're going to replace that suction flange. And when we do, make sure that drain plug's down at the bottom because that's the orientation that we're going to want once we put that suction flange back on there. Once we got that flange mounted on the front of that, now we can go ahead and spend the rest of the afternoon trying to get all those bolt holes lined up to get through the pump body, the gasket, and back into that mounting bracket. And that's not too bad with a single-stage pump. It does become a little challenging with a two- or three-stage pump because you can imagine trying to get all those to line back up. And then once we do get those all in there and we line them back up, we want to torque those down evenly, just like you would a car tire, all right? Just like you would a car tire. Now, here's a little tip. If you have to do this process or you do it very often, and again, this category of pumps, centrifugal pumps, they are pumps that are repaired. I mean, most of the pumps, the other categories of pumps, those things just get thrown away, replaced, field scrapped, and replaced. But these centrifugals oftentimes get repaired. And if you find yourself repairing these more than once, let me give you a little tip. All right, those through bolts. Here we go. I took one of those through bolts, just one, and I walked in, I don't know, a hardware store. I said, hey, I need bolts just like this. Y'all have these? And they said, well, sure, we've got those. I said, the same thread and everything? They said, yeah, absolutely, we have those. And I said, well, let me take a look. And they showed them to me. And I said, hey. They handed me ones, and I said, hey, I want one, a couple inches longer. Do you have them that way? Yeah. I said, okay, so I got these bolts that are 2 inches longer than the ones that actually go in the pump. Took those home, and I ground the heads off of them, right? Ground those heads off. Now what they become are what I call cheater bolts. Cheater bolts. Let's take this apart again. All right, here we go. Now, imagine this is a 2 or 3 stage pump, all right? I'm going to put my cheater bolts in first. That's the very first thing I'm going to do is put these cheater bolts in. Now, everything else is going to line up, isn't it? So when I put that gasket on, it's going to line up. If I have to put another segment on, it's going to line up with another gasket. It's going to line up. Everything's going to line up so that when I put that pump body back on, everything will be aligned with those cheater bolts, and those cheater bolts are going to allow me then to put the other 2 bolts in. All right, we're going to run those in down tight, down tight. Take the cheater bolts out, and I'm ready to go. So that's basically a walkthrough in about 30 minutes, I suppose, on how to repair and rebuild a centrifugal pump. And again, you know, when you have those unions, putting that pump back in service makes it a whole lot easier, you know, for the reinstall. I think at this point, yeah, what we're going to need to do is prime it, right? We're going to prime that pump up, make sure we fill that pump body all up with water again, including that suction line. And once that's done, then we can power this thing back up. All right, boom, there we go. And this pump's now been reinstalled and providing water to our service again. Anyway, again, I appreciate you joining me this morning, this Sippin' Ground Coffee series. And if there's any questions out there, you know, don't be, I should have said this in the very beginning, but don't be bashful about asking them. I'll give you a little bit of time to see if anybody might have any questions at all.
Yep, we got one here.
You got one coming in, Renee?
Yep.
All
So
right.
what time of year is best to make sure, you know, like to winterize your pump, you know, or to come back from the spring and make sure it's ready to use?
That I don't know who asked that. That's a great question, and believe it or not, as we speak, I'm putting a presentation together on that. It's called Winterizing Above Ground Pumps. And when we talk about that, I'm going to try to make this real brief, but when we talk about winterization, all right, I guess the first question I would be asking is, where are you from? Are you from Florida? Are you from Minnesota? Because those are 2 entirely different winters, all right? So when we talk about winterizing pumps, I'm going to be talking about the entire country, where some things work, some things won't, and that's another session, but a great question. And you want to definitely winterize it before it freezes. So there's the answer to that one. Anything else? Again, don't forget to hit that little, I guess Derek mentioned it's a little bell that's on your screen that if you click on that, that will allow you to receive notifications every time we're going to do one of these live streams. And we've probably got 3 dozen of them going to be doing between now and the end of August. So you can stay tuned that way. Anything else?
We'll let them roll in, but I'll let you know.
Okay.
Nothing right now, though. So keep going.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to close this session off. Again, don't forget to email that code word cartridge and subscribe to our newsletter. Cheers on the Groundwater ground coffee, and I'll hope to talk to you soon. Thank you very much.